Hey guys, welcome to another Monday morning chat with Rozella. Hi Rozella, how are you?
Hi.
Stephanie, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. We got a great response to our last questions one, so I decided this time we're going to continue with this format. This time I'm going to ask Steffani and Rozella to tell us the steps of the process. We'll focus on buyers and then we'll focus on sellers, and we're going to go all the way through. So step one for a buyer, what should they do, Stephanie?
Step one for a buyer. They've already made contact with the realtor?
I don't know, you tell me.
Well, I'm gonna assume because that's my role. So if somebody's contacting me, my first question is, number one, do you have an agent you're already working with?
So that's the step one for the buyer?
That's what I would ask a buyer.
Okay, you're going to ask a buyer that. What's the buyer supposed to do, step one?
Oh, step one would be to reach out to an agent or to their lender.
Okay, contact
One
an
of the
agent
two.
or a lender. Okay, well so I'm going to give you the choice. What did they do first, agent or lender, or do you care?
Either one, it doesn't matter, because if they were to reach out to the lender's going to get them their pre-approval. That's going to need to be like the first thing for the lender to do. And if you were to reach out to your agent first, an agent is going to get you in contact with the lender to get you your pre-approval. So either way, I think the result is going to be the same. You're going to end up with your pre-approval letter or your structure for financing and what that's going to look like for you as a buyer.
Got it. What's step two?
Well, you have your pre-approval in hand, and now you need that realtor to start showing you properties. You need to know what you want to buy.
Okay, so know what you want to buy. What does that entail, Stephanie?
Knowing what you want to buy means shopping realistically within your price point parameters.
Makes sense.
Most people have wants and needs. I typically ask my clients, what are those and what does that look like? And then you see what you can get. Sometimes you have a large list. Like yesterday, we created a search for some client that had 60 initially, which is kind of overwhelming. So we narrowed that down, and you can get really specific in a good market. And when you have a market that does not have as many options, then you have to be a little bit more open to what you may want to buy. So that's kind of going down your, checklist items of things that you want. That's how you create that list, and then your agent is going to be the one who then shows you what is available, and then you go through those to see then what you want to schedule for showings.
Okay, so I'm going to interject here from the lender's perspective, adding to what Rozella and Stephanie just said. When you know what you want to buy, and as they just said, you want to know what you're qualified to buy, how much you can afford, down payment, all of that. So that's going to be intrinsic in the upfront process here when you're talking with the agent and the lender. This might go back and forth depending on properties that you may be interested in. So Rozella, they know what they want to buy, they know what they qualify for, they kind of know their boundaries, their parameters there. What's next?
Well, you start the shopping process.
Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite part. You get to start looking at homes, but this kind of ties in with your parameters. Let's say you're an FHA buyer and you want a home, but if it's okay if it has a little work, but because you're an FHA buyer, the home's going to need to be within certain condition. So then during your shopping process, you're going to be going with your real estate professional, Stephanie or I, and taking us to the homes just to see, one, if you as a buyer like the home, and let's say you do like it, we're there also to help guide you and educate you and be like, okay, if you do want to make this purchase for your lending purposes to be able to buy this home, these things may need to be done. So we're not there just to open the door. We're also there to have eyes and ears and be the person that gets you to the right closing spot, if that makes sense. Because just because you are capable of buying certain homes doesn't mean the home is always going to fit what you're capable of buying.
Oh, that's
even though you like it.
Got it. Okay. All right. So you have a home. You love the home. You've determined that you are capable to purchase it because your lender says, "Yep, you're good." What type of loan works? All of that. What's next?
So as the agent, we are really good about communicating with the list agent to see what it is that's important to the seller, because that'll help us determine how to structure the offer. So once you've identified the property you like, okay, I can make this one work, then you're figuring out, well, how do we make this all work and come together contractually? Because like I said before, a handshake is great, but you actually need a legal binding contract. So then at that point, we are going to educate you as the buyer of what that's going to look like. We're going to communicate with your lender and say, we found a property, can we run some numbers, or at least that's what we like to do. So it gives a really clear picture to our buyers of what to expect to come next once they're actually under that contract. We go through and explain to them what that contract looks like, meaning from here's what we're going to offer, this is when your potential closing date is, we have this contingency in place. Biggest one is typically your inspection. We always encourage our buyers to inspect the property with a licensed and bonded contractor, because they kind of get there and go through a little bit deeper than what we do, and then we essentially submit the offer and see if we get it accepted.
Okay, you submit an offer, it gets accepted. Woohoo! A little bit of celebration.
Any more these days.
Woohoo!
Okay.
Yeah. What's next?
Oh, your offer's accepted. Okay, you're gonna tie into the contingencies that are in place on your contract. You're going to talk with your realtor and go over your contingencies, whether it's your inspection contingency, your finance contingency, whatever it is. You're gonna check your contingencies and start your checklist. Okay, what do we need to do to make sure that we are all set in this department, such as your inspection? That's typically 10 days. However, with our aggressive market, it's 5 on some offers. So you are going to make sure your inspection is within those 5 to 10 days, whatever it may be. And so yeah, contingencies are next.
What's
Okay.
another thing you do also? Sometimes even before inspection.
Oh, before inspection? You mean after your offer is accepted? Send out your mutual acceptance letter to everybody.
And
Escrow and title, and let everybody
Earnest
know.
money.
Earnest. Oh yeah, earnest money is within 3 to 5 days as well.
Mhm.
That would be another one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, what
That
are
one's sometimes-
contingencies, by the way? Good points.
Oh,
What
what
are
are
they?
contingencies?
Contingencies are layers of protection for you as the buyer, but there are also some contingencies that are also in place for the seller. So the number one that we just referred to was obviously the inspection, because sometimes, again, a property can look good, but there can be underlying things within a home that you would not see to the naked eye. Typically that's going to be something to do with like your electrical or your plumbing or the roof or the attic, all sorts of different things that, again, that licensed professional is going to go and see and inspect for you. And that contingency is put in place saying, I'm going to buy your house and here's earnest money in good faith. However, if something comes back that has not been disclosed or I could not see but then is then found, I have a way to get out and I'm not bound contractually to purchase this, and there's no harm, no foul, no money is going to then be released to the seller. I get to take my earnest money and then I have to start the process all over again. I would say most oftentimes it doesn't normally happen. Rozella and I are really good at our job, and we both have looked at houses a lot over the years, so we're pretty good at identifying certain things within a home that we can kind of almost beforehand prep you for. But again, if there is something that is out there that we don't see or we don't know, but then it's a huge financial burden to the potential buyer, then we also have that in place to help protect you.
Yeah, so protection. So contingencies are, I'm gonna buy this house contingent on something. The appraisal being okay, the inspection being okay. Contingent on financing. If I can't get financing, I don't have to
Oh
lose
no,
my
I
earnest
got
money.
fired.
Things like that. There you go. All right, so you're past the contingencies,
Yeah.
rolling forward. What's happening in the loan process, purchase process now?
Typically after your contingencies for like your inspection and stuff are met is when your appraisal is ordered. I don't know if we've got to, did you
Sure.
talk about that yet? I
No,
mean,
no,
you haven't
go for
really
it.
gotten there.
Go
Okay.
for it.
Appraisals then ordered by your lender. You say, hey lender, our inspection is good, everything is set, order that appraisal. That's your next hoop and obstacle typically, is to get that appraiser out there, get their eyes on the property, and make sure value is there for lending purposes.
Yep.
Yep.
And clarification here, inspections are very different than appraisals. The appraiser's our eyes on the property. As the lender, we don't see the inspection because the inspector's looking for problems, the appraiser's looking for value. Now, if there's a big problem, like a hole in the roof, and there's no window in that space where there's supposed to be a window, the appraiser's gonna tell us that, and that's how we need to identify things, and then those will need to be taken care of. Okay, appraisal's ordered, we're rolling forward. What are the steps here?
After the appraisal comes back, and we're gonna say it comes back at value with no conditions, meaning property looks good, price is good, all the above, you get that clear to close from your lender, and then woohoo, everything gets sent over to that escrow company for them to kind of finish up and get your final settlement statements, which is gonna outline what is due from the buyer, what's coming back to the seller. Us as agents, will schedule your final walkthrough. This is one as an agent and as a buyer. You don't typically want to miss this step because at that point you're going to go back through one final time of that property, make sure everything looks the same way. They didn't go through, take off light fixtures and, you know, things out of the home that were in your contract.
Walls aren't missing.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Pools aren't indoors.
Which I've never thankfully encountered that, so.
That happened to me my very first year in real estate. It was like my second listing ever. The buyer's agent called me and she goes, yeah, so there's holes in like walls and doors.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, what do you mean holes? She's like, yeah, like big holes. And I was like what size of holes? She's like hand size holes. And I'm like, oh, I see what you're saying here. Yeah, so that was fun.
So again, it's very important.
So humans are humans.
Go do that
Do your
final
walkthrough.
walkthrough. Yes, make sure everything looks good, and then you essentially are going to be waiting for the next and final step.
Which is?
Closing.
Yay!
Hey,
You
I want to
made
make a note for clear to close. Clear to close, when a lender is sending out clear to close, that does not mean that, woohoo, we're closing today, baby.
You know.
Clear to close does not mean that. What does clear to close mean from a lending standpoint when you're like, we are rolling, appraisal looks good, clear to close means what, John?
It means we are done with the underwriting process. There are still steps to get the house closed, but underwriting and the lending is basically complete.
Okay. Can they close the next day?
We've done it. We prefer not to. It's hard to make that happen because there's some steps in there. We have to order the loan documents. Sometimes that can take a day or two to get the documents to escrow. Escrow needs to review the documents before they prepare the settlement statement, and everything's clear there. They have to balance with the lender, which means escrow agrees with the exact amount of money that the buyer's going to bring in to close. All of those are steps that happen after clear to close. It takes a day or
And
two.
after your underwriting too, isn't there a 3-day period in there that you from the lending have to?
What you're thinking of, there are some 3-day periods. There's a 3-day period from something called the closing disclosure, but we'll get the closing disclosure out hopefully prior to the clear to close. So
Okay.
when we get to clear to close, we've already got that 3-day. When you sign the closing disclosures, you have to wait 3 business days before you can sign loan documents. And some lenders, and it's just happened just recently in a closing with us, will not send the closing disclosure out until you get the clear to close.
Right.
And then you're absolutely right.
You have to wait
Rozella.
the 3 days.
You got to wait 3 days
Yeah,
then
that's
before you can sign loan
That's
documents.
happening quite frequently actually lately. That seller disclosure, those are, or not the seller disclosure, your clear to close, and all of those are going out at the same time.
Yeah, we try not to do
and so
that
you
just
then
because
have
of that.
3-day period.
I have encountered where a lender just bypasses that
The 3-day period.
And I'm like, hold on, you can't do that, but
Clear to close though does not mean that you will be closing the same day.
Yeah.
You've
No.
got a couple days.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for
We
answering
can,
that, John.
once they sign the loan documents, we can fund the funds from the lender and the funds from the buyer all need to go to escrow. We talked about escrow in our last little chat that we had. Escrow gets all the funds, and then the lender says, we've reviewed the loan documents after they've been signed. You didn't miss anything. It's good. You go ahead to record. They get authorization to record. It gets recorded, and then you're
they
closed.
give you a phone call and then you celebrate.
Yeah.
And then you
Celebration.
get keys.
You get keys, hopefully.
And the one thing that typically happens with keys, everybody's, number one question once they know that they've sent, well, how quickly do I get the keys? Depends on the situation between the seller and the buyer. Typically the seller has already made arrangements to be out of the home, and essentially once you have recording numbers, you can get them as early as those recording numbers hitting. Sometimes you do have to wait because the seller, has other layers of purchases and sales that are going along with that one. So then it's a domino effect that then the house that they're purchasing is now closing because this one closed. And so legally, contractually, you have until 9 p.m., at least in the state of Washington, in order for the keys to be exchanged, unless you have some other prior agreement that's clearly identified.
Yep.